The conversation started the way such conversations started backstage, between musicians who were comfortable enough with each other to say things they would not say in front of an audience. It was a Thursday evening in November of 1969, and the backstage area of the Finsbury Park Astoria in North London was occupied by the particular collection of people that occupied backstage areas at rock concerts in England in 1969. Musicians, road crew, a small number of journalists and photographers who had been given access, and a larger number of people whose specific connection to the event was less clear, but who had found their way backstage through one mechanism or another, and who were now standing near the catering table with drinks. The conversation was about Chuck Berry. This was not unusual. Conversations about Chuck Berry were common in the backstage areas of English rock concerts in 1969, in the way that conversations about certain foundational things were common among people who had been shaped by those things and who had the particular relationship to them of people who had studied and absorbed and built upon them without having been present for the original. The English rock musicians of that generation, the musicians who had grown up in the late 1950s listening to American records on Radio Luxembourg and on the BBC's thin and intermittent coverage of popular music from across the Atlantic, had a relationship to Chuck Berry that was specific and intense. He was not simply an influence. He was, for many of them, the primary instruction in what a guitar could do in popular music. His records had been the curriculum. The specific shape of the conversation on this particular Thursday evening was a question. Someone in the group, not anyone whose name was significant in the story, had said that Chuck Berry was unchallengeable, that what he did on stage was something that could be learned from but not matched, that there was a quality to his playing that existed independently of technical proficiency, that you could develop technically beyond what Chuck Berry did and still not get at the thing that made what Chuck Berry did what it was. Eric Clapton was 24 years old and was standing near the far end of the catering table with a glass of something and the particular quality of presence he had in rooms where people were talking about music. Attentive in a way that was not performative, engaged without signaling his engagement. He was, in November of 1969, at a point in his career that was both extremely distinguished and genuinely transitional. Cream, the power trio he had formed with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker in 1966, had dissolved 3 months earlier at a concert in the Royal Albert Hall, and the dissolution had been the conscious decision of people who had reached the end of what a particular configuration could produce, and who knew it. He was in the particular liminal space that musicians inhabit between major projects, not yet settled into what came next, not under the pressure of a touring schedule or a recording deadline, available in ways that the preceding 3 years of constant and demanding work had not permitted. He had already been discussing with various people what came next. Blind faith was one answer, and it was an answer that would produce a single album and a single tour, and then dissolve in the same way Cream had dissolved, for similar reasons. Delaney and Bonnie were another answer, a touring configuration that appealed to something in how he wanted to play in this period. But on this Thursday evening in November, he was not thinking about what came next. He was thinking about Chuck Berry. He was in the building because someone had told him to be. Chuck Berry was headlining this Thursday, and the person who had suggested Clapton come to the Finsbury Park Astoria had said it the way people said things that they believed completely, which was without qualification. You should be there. Clapton had come. When the statement arrived that Chuck Berry was unchallengeable, Clapton did not immediately agree or disagree. He picked up his drink and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Someone should try." The group looked at him. He put his drink down and walked toward the stage. Chuck Berry was in the middle of his set. He had been playing for 40 minutes, and the Finsbury Park Astoria, which held just under 3,000 people, was doing what rooms full of people did when Chuck Berry was playing, a quality of motion and response that was not chaos, but was the opposite of stillness. He was playing Roll Over Beethoven, which was a song that communicated its own instructions to the audience. Eric Clapton came to the side of the stage. He found the stage manager, a man named Terry Briggs, who had been managing stage logistics for touring acts in London since 1964, and who had therefore seen a significant number of musicians arrive at the side of his stage, with intentions that ranged from the straightforward to the complicated. Clapton said he wanted to go on. Terry looked at him. Then Terry looked at the stage. Then Terry went and spoke to someone who spoke to someone else. And a guitar was found, and a cable was run, and at the conclusion of Roll Over Beethoven, Terry Briggs walked out to Chuck Berry on the stage and said something in his ear. Chuck Berry looked toward the side of the stage where Clapton was standing with the borrowed guitar. He looked for a moment. Then he nodded, and the band went back into the opening of the next psalm, and Chuck indicated with a motion of his head that Clapton should come out. Clapton walked onto the stage of the Finsbury Park Astoria. The 3,000 people in the room recognized him in the way that 3,000 people recognized Eric Clapton in November of 1969 in London, which was immediately. The specific sound that a room of 3,000 people makes when something unexpected and significant has happened was audible from the stage, from the wings, and from the corridor outside. Chuck Berry did not stop playing. He looked at Clapton, nodded once, and continued with the song. Clapton settled into a position at the side of the stage, slightly behind Chuck's position, and began to play. He was playing a borrowed instrument, a Fender Stratocaster that someone had found quickly and that was reasonably in tune. And he was playing it with the specific quality that Eric Clapton brought to every instrument he picked up in 1969, which was the quality of someone who had spent a decade learning to play in a way that was beyond most players who had spent the same decade. His technique was exceptional. His feel was developed. His command of the guitar was, by any standard applied by anyone in that room or outside it, at the highest level available to a human being who had been playing the instrument for approximately 12 years. He played Johnny B. Goode. He played the opening riff with the control and the tonal richness that his technique produced, and the room responded to it in the way that rooms responded to Clapton playing, a quality of recognition and approval that was distinct from the response to any other guitarist who might have played that riff that evening. Chuck Berry listened while he played. He played his own guitar alongside Clapton's at a lower volume, present but not competing. The specific musical generosity of someone who is giving another musician space. He listened to what Clapton was doing, and he received it with the expression of someone who is hearing something played at a high level and knows it. When Clapton finished the song, the room produced the response that 3,000 people produce when something has been done well. Chuck Berry stepped to the center microphone. He looked at Clapton for a moment. Then he began to play. He played Johnny B. Goode, the same song Clapton had just played. He began with the opening riff, the same notes, the same harmonic structure, the same arrangement that Clapton had played, and he played it in a way that was, by every measurable technical standard, not more impressive than what Clapton had played. He was not faster. He was not more accurate in his pitch, or more sophisticated in his voicing, or more ornamented in his phrasing. If you had transcribed both versions and laid them side by side on a music stand, the differences between them would not have been remarkable. What was different was not visible on a transcription. It was not in the notes. It was in the relationship between the notes and the time that contained them, the specific quality of where each note landed in the rhythmic pulse, not quite on the beat and not quite off it, but in a position relative to the beat that Chuck Berry had been finding and refining since 1955. The position that made the guitar feel like it was pulling the sound forward from inside, rather than riding on top of it. It was in the pick attack, the specific way that the initial contact between the pick and the string created a sound that was not simply a note, but a note with a very particular physical character, a character that communicated something about the relationship between effort and result that no amount of technical development could manufacture from the outside. It was the difference between playing a song and being the song, between performing what the music required and coming from the place that the music came from. The room went quiet, not silent. The rhythm section was still playing. Chuck was still playing. The sound continued. But the ambient quality of engagement that had been present in the Finsbury Park Astoria throughout the evening, the particular hum of 3,000 people actively responding, the background energy of a room that is with a performance, subsided. It became lower, softer, more interior. The room was listening in a different register than it had been listening before, the register that music asks for. Eric Clapton was standing at the side of the stage with the borrowed Stratocaster still strapped over his shoulder, in the position he had been in when he finished playing, which was the side-of-stage position of someone who has completed a performance and who is now the audience. He was watching Chuck play. His expression was the expression of someone who is receiving information through their ears and processing it in real time, not performing attention, but actually attending, with the full apparatus of a musician who has been playing seriously for 12 years, and who therefore has, more than most people in the room, the specific equipment to understand what they are hearing. He understood what he was hearing. He had played the notes correctly. His technique was not in question. His version of the song had been heard and received and applauded, and the applause was genuine. The room had recognized what he did as excellent because it was excellent. He was, by any technical measure available to anyone in the Finsbury Park Astoria or anywhere else in November of 1969, among the best guitar players on earth. What he was hearing from Chuck Berry was something that his technical excellence had not given him and could not give him. It was the song, not as a collection of notes arranged in a particular order, which was what his version had been, but as the thing that the notes were in service of, the quality of inevitability, of forward motion, of rhythm felt from the inside rather than executed from the outside. It was the difference between a musician who had learned the song and a musician who had written the song, not in the sense of authorship, but in the deeper sense of a person who carries the song in them at a level below notation, below technique, below everything that can be practiced in a practice room. Chuck was playing it from inside the song, from a position that 12 years of practice at the highest level could bring you close to, but could not put you inside of. When Chuck finished, the room's response was the same in category as its response to Clapton, but meaningfully different in degree, older. The particular response of people who have been reminded of something they knew and had perhaps temporarily forgotten. When Chuck finished the song, the room's response arrived, a response that was different in quality from its response to Clapton, not louder, but deeper, the particular response of people who had been reminded of something they knew at some level they had not been able to access consciously until this moment. Clapton walked to where Chuck was standing at the center of the stage and extended his hand. Chuck Berry looked at him for a moment, the same attentive, neutral look he applied to most things, and then shook it. They were standing together at the center of the Finsbury Park Astoria stage, two guitarists who had just played the same song in front of 3,000 people, one of whom had been playing guitar for 12 years, and one of whom had been playing guitar for 25. They stood there for a moment. Chuck said something to Clapton. What he said was not captured by a recorder or a notebook, because neither of those things was pointed at that corner of the stage at that moment. The press photographers and journalists in the room were attending to the larger event rather than to the specific conversation happening at the microphone stand between two men who had just finished playing. What Chuck said remained between them. What Clapton said about the conversation afterward, in the interviews where this particular evening came up, in the specific way the story was told in the years that followed, was this. He said Chuck told him the guitar was the same guitar it had always been, that it had not changed, that all you had to do was play the song rather than the instrument. Eric Clapton told the story of that November evening many times in the years that followed, in interviews, in conversations, in the contexts where the question of what he had learned came up. He told it in different contexts and to different people. in interviews that were ostensibly about other subjects, but that found their way to this story because the story was the most instructive thing he had to say about what he had learned about playing the guitar. And he was asked often about what he had learned about playing the guitar. He told it without embellishment, in the consistent way that people tell the most instructive things that have happened to them, with the facts in order, without the embellishment that would have softened what the instruction actually was. He said that he had gone onto the stage in the state of someone who was very good at what he did and who knew it. The confidence of genuine technical mastery, earned over 12 years. He said, "I went out there thinking about the instrument. Chuck was thinking about the song. I was playing the notes. Chuck was playing what the notes were in service of, and the room heard the difference before I did." He said, "I spent 12 years learning to play the guitar. Chuck Berry taught me in one song what the guitar was for. Not the notes, but what the notes served. I came in thinking I understood the difference. I left knowing I had only been to one side of it." If this story of an evening when the best guitarist in England learned something that 12 years of playing had not taught him moved you, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. Share it with any musician who has ever mistaken technical mastery for musical understanding. Have you ever heard someone play a song and understood for the first time what the song actually was? Tell us in the comments and ring the bell, because the next story starts the same way this one does, with someone who thinks they know how something works and discovers they were only partway there.